Welcome to Unbiased Recovery. I'm Casey Hurley. This is sponsored by Meta Addiction Treatment.
I'm Ed LePage, and we've got Spencer Paresky with us today.
How you doing?
Spencer is here as a man in long-term recovery, but also, so we're going to talk about that, right? We'll talk about what it's like to be a gay man in long-term recovery, a gay guy getting sober, and really like the advocacy that you do for the LGBTQ plus community. I'm terrible with acronyms, so I was really
perfect.
I was nervous about that.
Right?
You did great.
Thanks.
Good job, Ed.
So yeah, just I guess like, can you walk us through like maybe some of the challenges that you experienced early on in your recovery? As you know, I know where you got sober, right?
Yep.
As being whether or not you were the only gay person there or not, like the only gay person that was out of the closet at the time in getting sober around a bunch of straight men.
More accurate.
Yeah, was it a
Right.
challenging community to...
Yeah. So first I just want to say thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, man.
And I would say that in a lot of ways it was challenging. I got sober when I was 19. It was, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 months after my 19th birthday. I had only just come out, probably 6 months before I got sober.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so it was tough, like
Interesting.
trying to navigate like getting sober with like also like coming out, and yeah, I mean as far as it being like.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, please.
Do you think coming out allowed you to get and stay sober? Do you think you would have been able to stay sober without coming out?
I definitely think that I needed to come out in order
Okay.
to stay sober. Yeah, I don't think that anybody that is I don't think that anybody that feels the way that I did about my sexuality and just the reality of it and the shame and guilt that I carried for most of my life. I don't think that anybody can feel that way and stay sober for long term.
Okay.
I will say that there's a lot of people I think that are getting sober, and they're just not really completely sure where they're at, as far as as
We got
far
Mike
as
Pence's
yeah,
fly.
I saw that
Fucking
landed on your head.
Jesus. I was like, don't laugh.
When I
Serious topic. Don't laugh.
Yeah.
Seriously, they're going to be like, Casey said Jesus.
So
Fucking Spencer.
listen, when I got sober, I was the only guy that was out in the house.
Yeah.
Later, I had about, I would say, 2 or 3 guys that were in the house confide in me that they, also were questioning their sexuality.
Okay.
I think that,
I think that's pretty common.
yeah, and
More common than one would
it's
think.
exactly, and
Yeah.
I think that even more accurate, I think it would be to say that it's a lot more common than most people would care to admit.
Do you think
Yeah.
that there's more people that like question their sexuality and like may like, I guess, be like sort of bisexual than would care to admit?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to say because, I can't really, like, be the arbiter of, like,
Fair enough.
what somebody's sexuality is. I will say that, I've always sort of seen, since I've came out and since I've gotten sober, sexuality as being sort of a spectrum.
Yeah.
I think that, there are many people that are completely straight and there are many people that are completely gay and, they just have no interest in deviating from that. But I think that there are a lot more people than what are really out there who, have, we're talking about men in this instance who have experimented with guys and, possibly had the desire to do so, but they hadn't acted on it. Were curious. Maybe they had done things, for drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
And were confused about the way that, it made them feel. And so I think that there's a lot of different layers to it,
All right. No, and sorry to derail the conversation there.
No,
I
not
just
at all.
so like I guess like so that experience for you in getting sober, in being around a lot of people that were straight, or at least portraying themselves to be straight.
Yeah. Was it difficult?
Yeah, was that difficult?
Not really, just
Okay.
because I had lived as a straight guy for fucking 19 years of my life,
Fair
pardon
enough.
my language.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Pardon the way.
I had lived as a straight guy for 19 years, so, you know, I was very used to being around straight people, and, you know, all my friends were straight, and,
Yep.
you know, in high school, and, like, you know, and I always, like, presented to the world as a straight man, so, like, I wouldn't say it was difficult, just more maybe alienating in a way, because
Okay.
it's like I'm going through this new phase of my life and like trying to figure out like, you know, who I am, because I think to a certain degree everybody's trying to figure out who the fuck they are when they get sober.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, people
know.
have no idea who the fuck they are.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean?
Did you know who you were, Casey?
No, I still don't really. You know what I mean? It's like it's always evolving and
Constant
changing.
process, yeah.
Constant process.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though, like you coming out enabled you to be able to ask for help more easily, or just to, like, by going through something like that, did it lessen the fear of going through other, like, you know, big life things?
I'll say this. I think that coming out had a lot less of an impact on my ability to stay sober than I thought that it would.
Yeah.
I thought that I would come out of the closet and that would be like the silver bullet.
You'd fix it.
Be sober.
I could possibly fix it by
Yep.
getting honest with myself. And that just wasn't the case. There was, you know, as we know, obviously there was a lot more there.
Yeah.
You know, that needed work and needed to be looked at and addressed. But, you know, going back to what I said before, I definitely think at the same time that, you know, long-term sobriety or potentially even short-term sobriety wouldn't have been possible for me, you know, without... I know, this fly, this is going to be the bane of our existence.
Yeah,
this entire
it is.
podcast.
Yeah, it's like, you
I'll
motherfucker.
try to snatch it next time I see it.
Yeah.
But,
Are you quick? Ed's
yeah, it
definitely
likes
not.
you.
Smell like shit.
That's sweet blood.
A lot of surface
That's
area.
why. Yeah, that's true.
It's right to the head.
Right to the head. Yeah, they're like, look, I'm going to throw up on that, and then I'm going to eat it.
I'm
Well,
afraid to
perfect
open my
fucking
mouth.
spot.
I don't want to like swallow it.
Well, we'd be rid of the fly.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I guess, like, can you walk us through a little bit of, like, the process of, like, you getting sober? So, Unbiased Recovery, right? Like, we the name is intentional,
Yeah.
right? Because we want to be inclusive of people getting sober or getting into recovery through any means possible.
Right.
Right? And not projecting any sort of bias towards
Right.
any way that anybody is bettering their lives.
Like this is the way that it should be, or
Yeah,
someone
there-
should. Yeah.
Who gives
Because
a fuck?
as we've all learned,
Yeah.
the longer that we have sober, that's just not true.
Exactly.
You know? And that's not reflective of reality.
So,
But you
I
can
guess,
get
like,
in that mindset of, like, this is the only way. This is how
Oh,
it's
and I
taught to
was in
me.
that mindset.
Yeah.
I was in that mindset.
Yeah,
I was
I've
fully
been in it.
conditioned into that way of
Yeah,
thinking.
be like, this is the only way that
Yeah.
you can do it, and if you don't do it this way, you will not be able to.
You know, I
maintain recovery.
don't want to go off on a tangent, but a big part of me realizing that wasn't true was, I don't know if you remember this, Ed, but I had a friend who's also gay, who you know, who started a meeting with me.
okay.
in
Yeah,
Boston.
yeah.
And that, you know, I was probably maybe a year and a half sober at that point.
Okay.
And that, I think, was a huge part in me realizing that, whoa, you know, there are really other ways that people get sober.
So let me ask you,
know?
right? What led you guys to starting that meeting?
You
Because
know,
I think that's like an important thing, right? That people
Yeah.
don't realize that, like, not only are there men's meetings,
Mm-hmm.
not only are there women's meetings, but there are other meetings for
Right.
people
young
that
people's newcomer, all sorts
yeah,
of shit.
but
Yeah.
like more specifically to the
gay
gay community,
community,
the
right.
lesbian community, like
Absolutely.
transgender community,
Yeah.
right? So like, what was the idea behind you starting that?
yeah. So generally, you know, the meetings, you know, that you're referring to specifically, gay meetings, you know, meetings for folks who are transgender, you know, lesbian meetings, they usually like fall under they invariably end up usually falling under the umbrella of just like gay meetings
Okay.
or queer meetings. But I think that, you know, a big part of it, if I'm being totally honest, was just, you know, my friend and I wanted to start a meeting.
Okay.
You know, you know, I think that half of it was probably for ourselves.
Okay.
You know, that we just wanted
Was it step based?
It was step based,
Yeah.
yes. Yep. Well, it started as step based, and I think that it always was. But, you know, running it and being a part of it, you know, we realized that there that there are different ways that people take steps.
Yes.
That look slightly different than the way that we do. And, just a perfect example of that is, nowhere in the big book does it say that we have to write down our personal inventory.
That's true.
I used to have folks that would come to the meeting. That's true.
Make a list.
You look that up.
Yeah.
You make a list, but once you've wrote and read your 4-step.
Oh, okay.
It's
like 10-step.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. It certainly does not.
All it says is continue to take personal inventory.
Yeah.
It doesn't specifically.
It's like more of like that awareness.
Right. It doesn't specifically say, how one should do that. And so, that's just one example of, we would have people come to our meeting that, they wrote a 4-step, they read it, and, they were continuing to live in the step process, but when they had a resentment, they didn't write about it because that's not the way that they were taught to do it.
Right.
And they sort of just, did it in their head, and they were able to do that. And I think that, a lot of people can do that. I find that for me, I need to put it on paper.
Yeah.
Me too.
I have a problem with writing inventory. It's always been a huge problem of mine. I'm a chronic inventory slacker.
Procrastinator.
Yeah.
I'm a chronic inventory slacker. I've always had a problem with actually writing the inventory.
Yeah.
I can do it in my head, but I find for me the problem with doing it in my head is I don't always know the truth until I actually write it.
Yeah,
Well, I
I'm not
think
always aware
Where
until I.
as drug addicts and alcoholics, right, in long-term recovery, it doesn't stop us from being at that point where we still co-sign our own shit.
Right. Exactly.
And when I put it down in black and white in front of me,
right there,
regardless of whether I'm writing inventory, I'm journaling, I'm doing whatever sort of process it is that I've been shown, right, that has led me to the point in time in my life that I'm at, right. I see the truth, I read the truth, and I know if it's fucking fake.
And I was gonna say I can write a piece of inventory and then be like, I'm bullshitting myself.
Yeah.
Who am I kidding?
Well,
this is not the truth.
Exactly.
It's I just don't want to read this to my sponsor.
If a piece is a bad piece. If even when you're writing the inventory.
Spencer, I don't know if they're gonna be able to see us.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm blowing clouds.
Dude, just chucking clouds, bruh. But then if I write a crap
Can you
piece
see me now? Yeah.
But if I write a crap piece, then I'm like, I can't. We both know if I read that to my sponsor that he's gonna rip me apart.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I guess getting back to it, right? So you start the meeting, you understand, you start to get that understanding, right? That it's this can look differently for different people, right? And when did you come to the conclusion, right? So I guess we didn't say this yet, right? What do you do for work? What is it that you do?
So I work for a very large nonprofit LGBTQ health center in the Boston area. What I do specifically is I'm a project coordinator for a CDC funded research study on HIV. We target different demographics of people who have high instances of HIV infection, and it's sort of it's almost like kind of what they're doing with COVID right now, where it's community tracking.
Yep.
So that's what we are doing with HIV. So just to give you an example, in 2018 in Lowell, there were 10 new positive HIV cases in the previous year, the entire year in 2017.
Only 10.
Only 10 in 2017.
Okay. Wow.
In the first quarter of 2018, there were 130 confirmed cases.
It was like that in Lawrence as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
How does that happen?
So that's exactly the purpose of
fair enough.
of what I do.
Tell me the fucking answer.
Yeah. So it's investigatory, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out what behaviors that people are doing, what habits people have that are contributing to rates of HIV infection, how they're impacting HIV. So, for example, in Lowell, we found that one of the large causes, and we can do this by looking at the data that we gather by interviewing people and rapid HIV testing them, and seeing their answers and comparing it to the previous cycle.
Okay.
And we can see that people were injecting a lot more.
Yeah,
than
I was
they had
going to
the
say that. I've
previous year.
seen people that intravenously use drugs. I used to work at a detox, and they were on the PrEP that we had been talking about, specifically because they were at a much higher risk of contracting.
And the
HIV.
reason why we found that people were injecting a lot more, because when someone tested positive, we would send off a blood sample to the CDC lab in Georgia.
Okay.
And they would test for HIV to confirm the positivity.
Yep.
And they would also test for narcotics.
Okay.
What we found was, of all the samples we submitted, not a single one tested positive for heroin. It was all fentanyl.
Yeah.
And fentanyl, as we know, has a much shorter half-life than heroin.
Yep.
It doesn't have, legs like heroin does. So people
Right.
need to inject, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times
So
a
they're
day.
reusing the same needle. They're
Exactly.
sharing the needle.
They're sharing the same
okay.
needle.
I mean, I
over and
personally
over.
went through that with fentanyl.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you could no longer get heroin, and it was like an every 45-minute thing and then you end up sharing needles,
Right.
and then
So it's not just
because
a
you become
once.
so reckless,
it's not just a twice or 3 times a day thing anymore.
No, it doesn't last.
Right.
It's just very
That's
it just
interesting.
dissipates.
So not only is the drug that the people that you're serving,
What are you trying to say?
Fred's back here.
Fred the Fly.
Not only is the drug more lethal, but the manner in which
The
it's
consequences.
needing to be used
Exactly.
is more lethal.
Do you think that intravenous drug use has gone up since it's been fentanyl over?
Heroin? we've confirmed that it has.
Yeah?
We've confirmed that it has. Yeah.
In those specific
In those specific
areas.
circles, in those specific areas. I don't know really. So the cool thing about our study is it's federally funded, so it's national.
Okay.
So there are 22 project sites throughout the country.
Okay.
I'm in charge of helping the direct field operations for the Boston project site.
Now, what effect, if any, and I'm sure it has, but what effect has COVID had on your ability to continue this study and continue to serve this?
It's turned it
population?
on its head. It's turned it on its head. I don't know how much, how deeply and how detailed I can go into it. But I will say that we have went from
Oh, did you get it?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I will say that we went from a qualitative model of data collection where we would interview 400 people in rapid HIV testing
Yeah.
to a totally qualitative model. So we only have a handful of participants, and the interviews are much more in depth.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that everything is
Gather as much information from one person
yeah,
instead of
everything's gone remote. So we don't have the access, because normally we would be interviewing folks at gay clubs and bars and things like that. But since we're not able to do that anymore, we there are no venues from which we can recruit.
Okay.
Because they're all closed.
And so I guess here's a couple things that these are just questions popping into my mind, but are the people that you are rapid testing, are they informed if they're positive?
Yes.
Okay.
So how it works is essentially again, I won't go into it too much, but essentially we would ask a participant a series of questions about their drug use, sexual history, current sexual practices, things like that, and then we would compensate them for that, and then we would give them the option to do a rapid HIV test.
Okay.
And we would also compensate them for that if they chose to do it. That's a rapid test. So how it works is it's a finger prick blood draw. And if somebody tests positive, then we do a confirmatory test on the spot. And then we offer them linkage to care.
Okay.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah,
If
a
you
lot,
offer
depending
any
on the
sort of-
population, and this is very key, they may or may not take it. So,
Who is more likely to take it? I suppose?
The groups that we're primarily studying are heterosexuals and increased risk of transmission.
Okay.
So that would be sex workers, women of color.
Okay.
And the other one is men who have sex with men.
Yep.
And then the other one is injection drug users.
Okay.
Because those are the three groups
Big
that are
popular.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you
that are
offer
most at
them
risk.
options
Yeah.
for care for their drug use as well, or just
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay,
We have the capacity to offer them
a multitude of-
immediate treatment for their HIV, so we can get them hooked up with a provider. They can prescribe them antiretrovirals.
Yep.
So they can get their viral load down. We can link them to to substance abuse treatment.
Yep.
If they are having that issue. Not all of our folks are.
Right.
Not all the folks that we survey, I should say, are.
Right.
Particularly like in the MSM cycle, the men who have sex with men cycle.
Yep.
It's not always that drugs are a factor.
Right.
You know, but obviously in the injection drug user cycle,
It's
it's always a factor.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
common thing.
But whether or not people, you know, elect to take that is really, you know, that's another.
It's completely.
Do you
up to
find
them.
people having like a
Yeah.
hard time being honest with things like that? Because it's like obviously extremely personal questions, especially with I feel with like drug use. You know what I mean? People
You know,
don't want to.
you know something. I think that you know, in any other capacity, and we know this as people, you know, in recovery.
Yeah.
It is really difficult, but I think that, you know, because I've interviewed quite a few people,
Right.
You know, in the capacity that I'm in, and I would say that I think that most people do tend to be truthful.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, a big part of that is, you know, the compensation. I think
Okay.
that a lot of people are, you know, afraid to lie. Or they won't be compensated.
Yeah.
We do disqualify people, you know, based
If
on
you find out that.
if
yeah.
we find out that they're non-injectors or if they don't fit the eligibility
You're like, let me see
criteria.
Liars.
What's that?
Let me see your arms. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, well, you know, it's funny. We actually
We'll do that.
we will do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will do that.
Yeah, because people will definitely lie.
Yep.
Obviously, especially if they're you know
Well, if they're a drug user,
Yeah.
another.
Do you ever
means.
disclose
Yeah.
any part of your story to make people? Because like you know, like in our situations where it's like, you know, I trust someone else that's also an alcoholic, so where like I'm more truthful to them. Like, do you ever disclose any part of your story to them? Like, if someone's a drug user, to make them feel more comfortable, or is that not really part of the job at all?
It's not really part of the job.
Yeah.
You know, the whole point of having a human interviewer versus just like handing somebody a tablet
Yeah.
is to have that, you know, human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you know, I'm not a social worker. I'm not a caseworker.
Right.
My
Right.
role isn't to develop a necessarily
You're not
personal
getting a
connection.
rapport with them. You're
Right.
just.
I'm administering
interviewing.
a survey.
Yeah.
And actually, I think, you know, in many ways, you know, that actually lends credibility to, you know, the truthfulness.
Well, yeah.
because you're
when
more of a
people-
stranger.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
you
and you're
know?
not trying to. There's no like hidden agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
There's not
You're
like
like
this
I'm not
person's-
getting anything
This
out of
person's
this.
not going to
personally.
contact my
Right.
DCF worker. This
Exactly.
person's
I'm
not going
just
to
there to
contact my
listen.
probation officer.
I'm
Yeah.
just there to listen.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. I'm there to listen and record the answers, and I do my utmost, and normally I'm very successful in having absolutely no reaction at all, despite whatever people tell me, and I've heard all sorts of crazy shit as you can possibly you know that you can
Some
possibly
wild
imagine.
shit.
You know, because you know we're you know, particularly in the IDU cycle when we were up in Lowell, and you know then we were, you know, when we were in Boston as well, around the Roxbury area.
Yeah.
We were like, you know, interviewing some people that, you know, the worst of the worst.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
People on Mass Ave.
Yeah, people that
Yeah.
have
Which is like
been
incredibly
very
bad right
much
now.
victims of circumstances of their life that have brought
Exactly.
them to the position that they're in. Like,
Exactly.
I think when like the only reason I say that is like
Yeah.
because I think sometimes when people think worst of the worst, like they think of it like in this like that person's like a bad person.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
And
no,
I don't
yeah.
take it that you mean it that way
Right.
at all because I know you and I know that's not how you
Yeah.
think.
Thank you
But-
for bringing that up, though.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like I think one thing that like I think sometimes we discount is like the language, right? And like how we use it and what words mean and
Right.
like what we mean is like people
Linguistics.
that are in the word linguistics.
Linguisa.
Linguini.
The sauce
The
boss.
sauce boss. Linguine.
We call Ari the sauce boss sometimes
The
on this
boss of the
podcast. Yeah.
It's
But
I love that.
no, I think sometimes like we get into these modalities of like using terminologies like junkie and I
Yeah.
may say that about myself, right?
Right.
But like I don't put anybody down in saying that, but like I need to appreciate that somebody else might do that and somebody
Yeah.
else might put themselves down in hearing
I've
that.
seen people take offense to the way that I talk about myself.
Yeah.
They're like, don't do that. Why are you saying that?
Yeah,
like,
that's
I'll be
happened
like,
to me
I'm a
as well.
fucking junkie or
I've
whatever.
had
and
that
they're like,
experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then but it makes you look at yourself. It's like, you know, maybe I shouldn't talk about myself like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, and you know, I think that's actually a really good point because words do matter.
Yeah.
They do.
You know, and the impact matters, and so yeah, you know, I think, you know, all that is to say, you know, we're a lot of the times, you know, interviewing people that have been active, you know, injectors for decades.
Yeah, people that are like in really horrible situations.
Yeah, they're fully entrenched in you know the culture and in the street life.
And it's so hard to get out of that when you're in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you think that's the only way.
A lot of times people lose hope, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Complete hopelessness.
Which is like really, really sad.
Yeah,
you know?
it is. It's like a different level of hopelessness.
Exactly. And I was just about to say it. I can't say that I've really ever had that experience as purely.
Right.
Although there was a time in my life, obviously, I was definitely lacking hope.
Yeah.
You know, I always, you know, to some degree or not, you know, had the support of like my family.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I knew that they would be there for me when the time came. When the time came.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think that's where like the three of us up here have been very fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In a large respect.
And you know, also, you know, I don't need to like really state the obvious, but you know, like we're all white.
Yeah, we're white men.
Right.
Like
you know?
regardless of like whether you're a gay white man, like it's still
and even you know, and even that is, you know, not even exactly cut and dry because I mean, let's face it, I present as like pretty, you know, straight acting.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like a lot of the times people don't know that I'm gay, and that's created, you know, enormous privilege in my life. I can pass as straight, so I don't have to, you know, be careful.
Yeah.
You know, really, you know, depending on like what area I'm in.
No, and I think that's something that like I have. It's interesting, right? So like in the capacity that like I work today, like I meet with a lot of people, and somebody brought up to me yesterday this idea that within the addiction treatment realm, there is very little outreach done to people of color.
Yeah, that is very true.
And that's something that, like, I have been racking my brain about. And, like, I literally was sitting on my couch at some point last night and, like, made sure to write a note in my phone of, like, outreach to people of color.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
because,
you even asked
like,
me on the way up here.
And, me and Casey, like, drove up here together, and I was like, dude, like, something that, like, I really want to start thinking about is, like, how can we do that? Right? Like,
how can we reach as many people as possible?
Well, and that's some of the idea of this, right?
Yeah. I can tell you from the perspective of obviously not a person of color, but the perspective as, you know, and I don't say this, you know, on any level to compare.
Yeah.
But I can say, having the experience of being, you know, a gay man in recovery, I can say that, you know, spending a lot of time, you know, and basically most of my time around straight guys can be somewhat alienating, you know, because there are issues that affect me, both in my recovery and in my personal life, that just don't affect you guys, you know, and I think that the same is true, you know, I think I would argue a much greater degree, at least in my life, you know, to a much greater degree, you know, in people of color.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if there's one thing that I think have learned, you know, as people in recovery, that peer support with people who you can identify with is key.
Yeah, it's huge.
And so, you know, I think that, you know, there are meetings out there, you know, that are attended primarily, you know, by people of color, but there needs to be more, you know, and there needs to be more recovery available, you know, to people of color, to women as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And quality of care too, because you know, a lot of like the inner cities and things like that, it's like the options that they have available for them or people that are on mass health are far less.
Oh yeah.
You know, than people that
have
insurance.
Go to any private, you know, sober house, and 99% of the, you know, guests are white.
Yeah, well, and I think it's something that we really, as an industry, right, as a treatment industry, really need to take a look at and understand that, like, we can do better. Right?
Yeah.
And, like, it's going to need to involve not three white dudes
not the
sitting at a table trying to figure it out.
Exactly.
Like,
not the 21-year-old Italian kid from Stoneham, good guy, local guy. You know,
good guy, local guy, handsome guy.
That's the demographic that we all you know, that we all sort of cater to in a sense.
Yeah, and so I think that, like, well, no, but you've stepped out of that realm, and that's one of the reasons why we, you know, like I was speaking with Dylan and about who to have on, and he's like, have Spencer on.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we should, and like I was like, he'll bring something else to the table, right? First of all, like, I love hanging out with you because you're fucking hilarious.
Oh, you too.
And then, like, the idea of, like, being able to talk about, like, what you do now.
Yeah.
And how you work with underserved populations.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, I think, to a large extent, drug addicts and alcoholics in general are an underserved population.
Definitely.
But taking it a step further, there's subgroups.
There's layers of oppression.
Within-
There's layers of inequality.
Well, and
you
like,
know?
so I was talking about this the other day, and like, the idea that like different medication-assisted treatments that are available to people have different availabilities to them, right? So like, you can, you know, to some extent, go to an emergency room and walk out with a prescription for Suboxone, right? And have
Can you?
Yeah. And like, honestly, like, I think that's amazing, right? That like you can actually get at that time care for what you're going there for.
Immediate.
Right? Immediate care, right? But like, to be on methadone,
It's a process.
it's a process.
Yeah, you have
need
to-
to go there
yeah.
on a daily basis.
Right.
You may have to go there for years before you
Before
can
you
have
get a
take homes.
take home, yeah.
Yeah. To
And
show that, like
how much
Right.
of that, like, I understand that there's some rationale between methadone being a pure opioid versus Suboxone having
A blocker.
a blocker
Yeah.
involved in it, but also like how much of that has to do with like the stigma that had been overcome in like the 20 to 50, I don't know math.
Yeah.
Or
I don't do math.
I don't do math and I don't do dates. But the amount of time in between like methadone coming to market and Suboxone coming to market, like obviously there was a vast improvement in how drug addicts and alcoholics were seen by the general society.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. And, you know, not to, you know, cartwheel too far off of that, but, you know, you mentioned meth. And, you know, that's another thing that I sort of wanted to you know, talk about is, you know, I would say that for the gay community specifically, and this includes, you know, both white and people of color, drug use and excessive alcohol use is like absolutely rampant.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell you how many situations that I, you know, have you've been in, you know, around gay people, both sexual and non-sexual, where there have been drugs involved.
Right.
You know, from, you know, usually it's like more than just like weed or like alcohol, like, you know, meth,
Yeah,
GHB.
meth is huge in that.
Yeah, meth is huge. GHB.
Yeah.
You know, those are like
Drugs that I never
Tina.
saw.
Yeah,
You know what I
Tina,
mean?
yeah.
Do you ever do meth, Ed?
PNP.
No, never
No?
seen it.
No?
Yeah.
See,
I would have.
I hadn't seen it before I came out and before I started hooking up with guys.
I did meth with a completely different group of type of people, more of like a you know,
Like
almost-
bikers?
Yes.
Yeah. Because those are like the two groups, oddly enough.
Yes. The
It's like-
polar opposite.
I know.
Yeah.
They're like bikers, like Hells Angels and shit,
Yeah.
and then like, you know, gay guys.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a huge problem, and there's this pressure in the gay community to consume
Really.
Interesting.
more sex, more drugs.
Okay.
And then, you know, just sort of like
It's like everything in
Like
general.
sort of almost like a hedonistic lifestyle,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. You know, I don't think that like, you know, that's true for, you know, all or, you know, even most gay guys, but I think that
Within
you know,
that subculture.
yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, that the gay community, the queer community at large, like, you know, has you know, does have an issue with
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say gay community and then you transition to queer community,
Yeah.
are those two different things? Are they one and the same? Are those synonymous?
They're so like the gay community is part of the queer community. So
Okay.
queer is like an umbrella term that you know, describes anybody that isn't straight cis male or straight cis person. Actually.
Okay.
So that could include you know, non-binary people that are trans, you know, both male and female trans people.
Okay.
That could include you know, bisexual people, lesbians.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
It's an umbrella
It's an
sort of
umbrella
term.
term.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, like you know, there's this pressure, and you know, the interesting thing is, many of the people that I know, that I've met over the years that are like really involved in that subculture, you know, partying and, you know, doing drugs and having a lot of sex. A lot of them are like very, you know, otherwise like polished, put together people,
Yeah.
professionals,
Yep.
people in the medical community, doctors.
Yeah, I've had
you know.
friends like that in all other aspects, kind of like it says in the book, in like all
Yeah.
other regards. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like pretty
But there's
putting
this
together people,
stigma against getting sober, against recovery.
Yeah.
In the queer community.
Why? So why do you think that is?
I think that there's this attitude that as long as I can make it to work and get my shit done in my life,
Then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm okay.
So do you think so? I'm fairly liberal in this respect of like my viewpoint of like what is addiction and what is drug abuse and
Right.
like do you think that the people that consume and drugs to like that large degree in those time frames but like still are going to work, like are you talking about these people in believing that they are drug addicts and alcoholics, or are you thinking that they are like heavy drug users?
I mean, it's tough because it's self-diagnosed, right? You know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, in the sense of AA, but like in a clinical sense, no. There's actual dimensions
I would-
within the
I would
DSM-5 to diagnose.
I would say definitely. You know,
that a lot of them would qualify as having some substance
yeah,
use disorder.
definitely. You
Okay.
know, and I think that the interesting thing about drugs in the queer community is a lot of the times it's interlinked with sex.
Okay.
A lot of the times these drugs go hand in hand with sex. Someone may never smoke meth. Shooting is a different story. Generally once somebody's at the point where they're using needles.
That takes you to a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's a whole different
in
dimension.
any drug.
Exactly.
It took my life
Exactly.
to a completely different, honest low.
Right. So putting that aside, smoking meth, taking GHB.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of like weekend warriors out there.
Yeah,
Okay.
they use it more of as like a party
They use
aspect.
it more as a party drug, as a sex drug.
And I can see why somebody like that may not like. So here's where like my thing is like, you do you, but don't have something against somebody else getting sober.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But
And there's a lot of stigma against sobriety. I think that surface level there's not,
okay.
but I think that I personally know, because I'm pretty active with like the gay recovery community
Yep.
in Boston. My home group's gay, and I would say that like there's a lot of sort of fair weather friends, and a lot of that is again tied up in sex. So it's like good for you getting sober, but if you ever wanna smoke and fuck,
Hit me
hit
up.
me up.
Yeah.
So
Hit me
there's
up
that.
if you want the
Exactly.
want
Which
the D.
isn't really all that different than
Any other could be. I mean,
right.
yeah.
So,
it's
but-
different, but it's not.
So I think like in the straight, it's interesting, right? Because I like me personally, right?
Yeah.
Like that sort of lifestyle appealed to me when I was using,
Right.
but
What lifestyle?
like the hookup culture and all that sort of
Okay.
stuff. But
yeah.
once I got sober, and this may be different for like a straight man than
Yeah.
a gay man, right? But once I got sober, like that didn't really appeal to me. Like I wanted
Same thing happened
like
to me. It was.
I wanted stability.
I've heard that
I wanted
experience a lot.
I had.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I had zero interest in like having sex with
That's-
anybody.
see,
When
it's
I got
funny.
sober, I was like, I just don't even care.
Because one of my roommates is straight, and I won't say who he is.
Yeah.
But he's a total savage. I mean, he's constantly having sex.
What do you call him?
He's a
Savage.
Oh, okay.
He's constantly having sex.
Okay.
I would say that's I would put that down to like more of like an
A
individual.
personal sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I
'cause-
guess
yeah.
So, but like to me, like once I got sober, those two things didn't necessarily go together.
I
I think your
like-
priorities shifted.
Well, no,
And you were
but
so
I meant
focused
like,
on
but the
sobriety
people
and-
that I was attracted to,
Right.
that wasn't like a thing, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah,
like
I see what you're saying.
Let's get
Yeah.
fucked up and
you were more
fuck.
attracted to someone's like who they are as a person.
Yes, that-
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
mine has changed
So-
exactly like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, not without airing out my dirty laundry too much.
you can.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
I definitely I'm somebody that can do that.
Yeah,
I think that for me, and this is actually really interesting, and it's a good thing to talk about because I think it applies to straight people too. I think it's just about for me being ethical in your sexual affairs.
Well, no, and I think that that's entirely
like
true.
relaying your intentions to someone.
Relaying your intentions,
Practicing safe
Is
sex.
that something that you put right out there?
I don't even think that necessarily is.
You don't think so?
I don't think that's a morality issue.
Because I think that when it comes to safe sex,
I'm not calling it a morality issue. I'm just.
I like to.
true.
So I
I
like
just
to
need to
use
put words
the
in your
term.
mouth.
I like to use the term safer sex.
Okay.
Right, because I think that sex, whether prophylactics are used or not, is inherently risky.
You're using all words that I don't know what they mean.
Prophylactic being a
Condoms.
condom.
Okay.
PrEP. Hand jobs instead of blowjobs, things like that. Anything that reduces
Old-fashioned.
sexual. Right, an old-fashioned handy,
Yeah, I know for the dungarees
Yeah,
handy.
exactly. a little Hayudisky,
How you doing?
Let's take a turn.
I think that those practices are tools to reduce risk.
Yeah.
But risk can't be entirely eliminated as far as contracting STIs.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah.
and the only way that you can completely
Don't have sex.
Exactly.
Abstinence.
But I think that when it comes to, because that's the other thing, right? Since the advent of PrEP, and I should probably just mention this maybe for some folks out there that might not know. What PrEP is it stands for pre-exposure prophylactic. And it's basically an antiretroviral drug, which is a class of medication that was developed to treat active HIV infections.
Okay.
And prevent it from metastasizing into AIDS.
Yep.
So it basically suppresses your viral load, which is the amount of HIV in your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, basically they found out, through extensive clinical trials, that when you take a certain class of anti-HIV medication, it prevents you from contracting the virus.
To begin with.
Exactly.
There's a post one too, right?
There
If
is.
you feel as though you might have.
I'll touch on that.
Yeah.
But basically, what PrEP is it prevents you from contracting HIV. It's 97 to 99% effective when used daily.
That's great.
There's only been a very small handful of people that have contracted HIV while adherent to PrEP. Mm-hmm. I think about half of those cases. I think there's only been 3 or 4. 1 or 2 of those, it was unclear whether or not the person was fully adherent.
Okay.
And then the other 1 or 2 contracted a very rare strain of HIV that is extremely uncommon outside of sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay.
So they basically just got really unlucky.
Yeah.
But all that is to say, it's nearly 100% effective.
That's awesome.
It's actually more effective than condoms. Now, I will say, in a clinical sense, it's designed to be used with condoms.
Right.
It's
Well-
designed to be used as a harm reduction method in conjunction with condoms. But the reality is that, in my experience and in the experience of, other people I know, gay men that I know, it's often not used that way.
Yeah.
It's often used, as a means to have unprotected sex. bareback
Yeah,
sex.
without like the worry of.
And I think that when it comes to
Well, it's
unprotected
not unprotected sex at that point.
right, and I think when it
just
comes
sex.
when it comes to
Not
unprotected,
as protected as.
It's not as-
well,
right.
it's funny what I say to like my straight friends is like, bareback sex, or as you people call it, sex. It's like because it's like in the straight world, doesn't really have a name. It's just sex.
Just
Yeah,
sex.
Yeah,
It's just.
exactly.
Did you use a condom?
Right, exactly. So
Use a condom next time.
and I think there are obvious reasons for that because
Yeah.
Instances of HIV are much higher in
Yeah, right.
the MSM community, just due to the nature of how HIV is transmitted. It doesn't have anything to do with someone being gay. It's not like the virus has a
No.
ethical it's like an ethical heat-seeking missile.
I'm pretty sure there was some
know.
politicians back in the 80s that.
Thought
That thought that, yeah,
Yeah.
certainly, but it just comes down to the fact that anal sex is an easier way to transmit HIV.
Right.
And obviously anal sex is much more common in
Right.
men who have sex with men than
Right.
people, heterosexual people.
Right.
But to go back to what you said, yes, there is also there's another option for a potential HIV exposure, and that is post-exposure prophylactic, which is a combination of various HIV medications that, when taken, I believe it's 72 hours. 72 hours when taken within a 72-hour window, and it gets it gets less effective the longer you
Yep.
wait. It can significantly reduce the chance of the person that's taking it contracting HIV.
That's
So there's
awesome.
been unbelievable advances, in the field of HIV management and prevention. HIV is a manageable disease now. The vast majority of people that live with HIV are completely healthy and will live completely normal life expectancies.
Which is like a huge amount of progress.
That's a
even
huge
from
amount
like
of
when
progress.
we were kids in the 90s.
Even even 25 years ago, people were routinely dying of AIDS. Still.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's
And quickly,
incredible.
like you said, too.
It's, I mean, and that's, I think it's great that like we can allow science to come that far.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
that like we can support science to come that far. Because it needs to.
The other thing that I just want to mention is, I personally have heard of a lot of stigma, within the recovery community, particularly coming from straight people, straight guys. About HIV. People say like the ninja. People. People. And I think it's like,
I've never gotten that term. Why anybody would ever say that?
I think
people say it all the time, and well, maybe not all the time, but I've definitely heard it.
Yeah, I've heard it. It makes
Yeah.
no sense.
Oh,
but,
no.
Yeah, I don't really get
agree.
it.
And it's like, straight people can get HIV too.
Right.
Especially like people
sharing needles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, do you think that you're not
Right.
just as much at risk?
I mean, every single person that I personally diagnosed with HIV, I think maybe I wouldn't say every single person. I would say probably 90% of them were reported that they never had sex with a man, that they never had any sexual contact with a man.
interesting.
They got it from sharing needles.
Right. And like it has such this like pigeonhole as being like
A gay virus.
a gay
you know?
male.
Right.
Like,
and they used to call it that. They used to call it GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. Yeah, that was the predecessor to what we now know as HIV.
I'm learning a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
I could
Like-
give you a whole. But I think the other thing that I just really wanted to quickly touch on is, I think it's important for people to know that when somebody is correctly adherent to their HIV medication and their viral levels are suppressed, they can get to what's called undetectable viral load. And what undetectable viral load means is your level of HIV is so low in your blood that it can't be detected by a standard HIV test.
Mm-hmm.
You need to use a fourth generation RNA DNA test to even detect the virus. And even then, the levels are so low, and people can fact check me on this. Because it's been reported, actually a few years ago at this point, by both the World Health Organization and our own CDC, as well as National Health Service and a myriad of other
reputable organizations
right throughout the world.
Yeah.
That undetectable means untransmittable. So if you have an undetectable viral load, it doesn't matter what you do, you cannot transmit the virus to anybody else.
That's just like people taking care of themselves.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and that's what we're all about here, right?
Exactly.
It's like people taking care of themselves however they can, right? But yeah, no, I appreciate.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Because people definitely, like, I've seen, like, react in a certain way.
Like,
to
I
people,
wouldn't
like,
have sex with somebody with HIV.
Or no, like, people just are weird about it in general. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to share a drink with them. People
Right,
have been like
right.
that with, like, hepatitis. They're like, dude, can I share your drink? And I'm like, I mean...
Not understanding that hepatitis is a bloodborne disease.
Right.
It's not transmitted.
Yeah, I mean,
through
it's
saliva.
not even remotely the same, but
Right.
you know what I mean? There's negative...
There's a stigma.
There's a
stigma. And I would say that for most people living with HIV that I have spoken to, in my life throughout my recovery, they all tell me, or most of them tell me the same thing, that the worst part about having HIV in 2020 is the stigma.
Yeah.
It's not the virus itself, because the virus itself is completely manageable.
Right.
It's the stigma. It's having to, break that news to prospective partners.
Yeah.
And, the potential rejection that can bring. And I think that, I'm not, again, I'm not like the arbiter of like what people are comfortable or uncomfortable with as far as their own sexual health. But like, all I can say is that, it's important to understand the facts. It's important to understand that, if anybody was ever in a situation where they were having to decide, if they wanted to be sexually involved with somebody in a romantic or non-romantic sense, who was serodifferent, who was who was HIV positive, and they were virally suppressed, it would not be possible for them to transmit the virus to you. And I think that knowledge is power, and knowing that will allow people to make decisions that are based in reality rather than this sort of boogeyman stigma.
40-plus-year-old
exactly
fallacies that are no longer true,
that we've
and
dispelled.
Yeah, and so I guess, dude, like, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you for educating myself. I'm sure Casey got an education on this
Absolutely,
as well,
yeah.
and
I was
like,
going to remain teachable.
I think that a lot of this is like in line with like our idea of like breaking the stigma around addiction, around recovery.
It always comes back to the stigma around something. You know what I mean?
So, thank you again, and this has been Unbiased Recovery, and thank you, Spencer.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.